Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2023-24 season. My name is Dan and it's time for our Game Week 29 tier list video where we're going to be ranking some players, and I hope this video is going to be very useful to you whether you are free hitting this game week or not, identifying those blank Game Week 29 targets. So guys, if you enjoy this one, make sure you drop a like. Let's get started. So 5 categories. As always, we're going to go through the 30 most popular transfers in at time of recording. And I think the first thing we can do is very easily drop a bunch of players into the avoid category, because despite all of these players blanking, people are still transferring them in. So Solanke, Rice, Onana, Foden, Darwin. We've got to keep going. Salah, Van Dijk, Fabian Schär, we're not done yet, and Ben White, all going to go in the avoid category straight away right now. Very easy to put all of these players in the avoid category because none of them have a fixture, and I don't really see a reason why anyone would be bringing in these players. Now, I know a few people who might be free hitting this game week might think they could do something very sneaky and make a transfer before free hitting, but you guys should know that if you free hit in game week 29 or whenever, your team in game week 30 is going to be it's basically going to be the same as your game week 28 team. So that's what happens when you play your free hit. The following game week, your team is reverted to the previous game week from when you played free hit. So you cannot make a transfer now and then free hit and your transfer will still be counted. It won't. It will be gone. As well as if you've got any bonus transfers, if you've got a banked transfer saved, that will also be wiped out throughout the game week that you free hit. So free hit cancels everything that happens in game week 29 and then reverts you back to your game week 28 team with just one free transfer, no matter how many you had blanked. So I just wanted to put that one out there. Very little reason to go for any of these players. I guess if you are wild carding, then maybe you might be considering one or two of these players, but personally, I don't really like the wild card 29 strategy. I guess you could do it if you are absolutely desperate and you don't have a free hit at your disposal, but yeah, just wanted to put that one out there. All the players who don't have a fixture this game week, you don't buy them this week. I think that's pretty straightforward, and most of you guys will already know that. So let's move on to the players who actually do play this game week and see which ones we might want to prioritize bringing in. So I'm going to start off with Rorslev, who I think is possibly, at this moment, the best Brentford defender to go for. Obviously, we are talking about a fullback who should be pretty nailed on in this game week, which is pretty useful. Rorslev, plays every game. He has a tiny bit of attacking threat, but not really too much. There isn't too much attacking threat, really, among the Brentford defenders now that Reguilon is injured, unfortunately. But Rorslev is probably the best you're going to get. He's not like a set-piece threat or anything like that, but from open play, particularly when Brentford go with a back five, you could get the odd attacking return here and there. So I guess he could be worth going for in this fixture against Burnley, and at the very least you would hope for a clean sheet. It's one of the few fixtures in this game week where you actually could potentially expect a clean sheet with Brentford playing against Burnley in that game. Brentford can dig in deep and keep a clean sheet when they need to. Next up, Areola. I think he is going to be an optional player, but that really is the best we can come up with because West Ham continue to be very poor defensively, and yes, he has a fixture. Yes, he's very cheap, but aside from that, he's not going to offer you too many points. You could get some save points in that Aston Villa game. We don't expect West Ham to ever keep a clean sheet, though, really, as they are kind of tracking as the second worst defence in the Premier League at the moment, only after Newcastle. So with Newcastle getting all this press about how bad they are defensively, West Ham really aren't too far behind them, and they've kind of gone under the radar about how bad defensively they are. I mean, they just conceded 2 goals to Burnley, a team that famously struggled to score goals this season. So Areola is going to drop him there in the optional category, but he's going to be a low optional and not a player I would go for unless I was trying to kind of save some money potentially there. Collins is going to go in next. He's going to go right next to Rorslev. I think Collins has a little bit of attacking threat from those set pieces, potentially. No open play threat, of course. He's a centre-back. What more can you expect? But in general, I think I would prefer to go for Rorslev. Those two players kind of similar, though, going for that Brentford defence. I think it's definitely very much optional. The one Brentford defender I would prefer to go for to those two guys, though, is Flecken. I think Flecken is certainly a good transfer. He's probably my favourite goalkeeper to go for this game week. Highest chance of a clean sheet. A goalkeeper who can make some saves as well. It looks pretty decent, so we are going to throw him in there. Looks like an okay goalkeeper to go for in this favourable fixture. And yeah, only 4.5 million. Pretty cheap as well. All good in the hood. Next up, Alanga, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to have to drop him in the optional category. He is a player who actually has a high amount of potential. His attacking numbers are really, really good. He's been quite wasteful, though, in front of goal. So although he's getting the chances, hasn't been quite finishing them off. And that may be factored into a reason maybe why he was actually benched in game week 28. So I think that's a slight worry. If you're going for Alanga, you've got the numbers there, but you've got a player who has just been benched. Are they going to return to the starting 11 in game week 29? You kind of hope so if you go for him. Very, very cheap, very, very nice, but I have to say he is a bit risky. I like him as a differential. I like him as a punt, but a little bit too risky for me potentially there, as is Timo Werner. I think he's worth going into the conversation perhaps, but maybe just a little bit too risky for me with that minutes risk that he poses. I mean, Brennan Johnson is going to be the other player who may be rotating with Werner. We're not sure who's going to start, and since, you know, we've got the pick of the bunch of players right now, is if you're on a free hit, you can have any player you like. You probably can find someone slightly better than Werner. If you are just making transfers alone, then, you know, you're not going to want to have a Timo Werner in your FPL team for the long term either, because we expect Richarlison will be back in game week 30 anyway. So yeah, I don't think Werner is going to be a top priority pick, but if you really want to go differential, you really want to take a risk here, then maybe he's a player worth talking about. Which brings us to our next pick, and that is going to be Bailey. Bailey is a really, really interesting one. I'm going to put him in good transfer for now, but as we will soon see, when we compare him to some of the other attacking options, he is definitely up there and a player I'd strongly consider. Now, obviously, Aston Villa struggled a little bit against Spurs last game week, but moving forward to this game, it's a game against West Ham. This is a very, very good fixture for any attacker. And when we look through the fixtures, I know a lot of people are looking at Spurs with the best attacking opportunity against Fulham. I actually wonder, is Aston Villa, you know, they've been a fantastic attack this season. Are Aston Villa going to be the team that actually score the most goals this game week? I think there's a very good chance of that happening. And Bailey, when we look at the best Aston Villa attackers to go for this game week, well, after Ollie Watkins, Bailey is the second best guy. He is a player who consistently has decent attacking threat, creativity, taking shots on, getting in dangerous areas throughout the games. It's a really, really, really nice pick there at a very, very cheap price as well. So I like Bailey. I like him a lot. I would be tempted to put him in a great transfer, but I'm going to drop him in good transfer because he is a kind of more of a 60-70 minute man. He's not like a nailed on for 90 kind of player. And I do think there are some other potential options in midfield as well, but don't get me wrong, I like Bailey a lot for this game week. Which brings us to our next pick, Robinson. I'm going to drop him down pretty low in optional. He does have a little bit of attacking threat, and I think Fulham are better defensively than perhaps they get credited for, particularly now that they'll have Palhinha back in their team. But unfortunately for Anthony Robinson, he is playing against a very, very potent Spurs attack, and a clean sheet is not going to be easy to come by for any team this game week, let alone Fulham, who are, you know, arguably, you know, Spurs are the best attack for this game week. Maybe you expect Aston Villa to score more goals against West Ham because they're a slightly superior fixture there, but in general, you know, we're hoping, I guess, for a Robinson attacking return. If you're going to go for him, that's the best you're going to get from him. Not really good enough for me, even at 4.5 million. And speaking of 4.5 million players, Muniz, I'm going to put into the good transfer category. I think he is one of my favourite attackers to go for this game week, playing against Spurs at home. Another Fulham player. Now, Spurs, although they are great in attack, their defence is not always perfect. Now, to be fair to Spurs, their defensive numbers have been a little bit better recently. They have struggled for clean sheets up until game week 28, but their defensive numbers aren't too bad. And maybe you could say that is partially due to the fact that, you know, they've played some quite favourable fixtures, but it has to be said that Muniz is a player in red-hot form. First time blanking in what seems like forever in game week 28, and even in that game he could have easily got a goal in that game last game week as well, but it wasn't to happen. Moving forward, when we look at Muniz, he is a player in such good form that, you know, when we're looking at the limited players available for game week 29, when you see Muniz as one of the informed players of the Premier League, he's definitely very, very tempting to go for if you want to kind of move away from the template picks a little bit this week. Very cheap as well, 4.5 million. So if you are on free transfers and not using your free hit, maybe selling one of your attackers for Muniz could free up a lot of budget. Maybe a good way of going into maybe a 3-5-2 formation for the longer term. That could work out really, really well if you want to free up some budget. Maybe you want to bring in Salah to your team next game week. Again, you need to buy a cheap player in order to raise the funds to get Salah back into your team. Muniz is going to be a great way of doing that. So I really, really do like this pick a lot, particularly for non-free hitters, but free hitters as well. I think you can really, really take advantage by going for Muniz. Let's go back to Spurs with a doggy. I think he is probably a good transfer at 4.9 million. It's a very, very good price tag for him. Again, I'm not 100% sure if I expect Spurs to keep a clean sheet in this game, but Udogie has a little bit of attacking threat there. You would say he has more attacking threat than the likes of Roslev and Collins at Brentford, for example. So although those Brentford guys, you maybe expect more likely to get a clean sheet, just about. But you would think that Udogie has the potential to get an attacking return a little bit more so than some of those guys. And I don't think a clean sheet is completely unbelievable. Hey, I don't think any of us really expected Spurs to keep a clean sheet away against Aston Villa, but it happened, and Udogie was picking up the points therefore. So I think it's a decent pick at this price, and a player you can hold on for future game weeks as well if you are not free hitting right now. Next up, Wissa. And I think he is probably going to be one of the most underrated picks of this game week. And not a lot of people talk about Wissa because it's all about Tony in that Brentford attack. But Wissa has actually got pretty much the same kind of attacking numbers as Tony since returning from AFCON. Now, of course, Wissa does not have penalties, and there haven't been any penalties for Brentford recently. But when we look from open play, Wissa, just as good as Tony recently. He really, really has been. So I think, yeah, genuinely, maybe a little bit of a dark horse kind of player for this game week. If you want to take a risk, you like the look of this Burnley fixture, you fancy doubling up on the Brentford attack potentially, maybe Wissa is going to be a good way of doing that. I would say after Tony, he is probably the second best attacker to go for from this Brentford side. Moving on to Doughty. I think he has to go at least in the good transfer category. If we're looking at the best defenders for this game week, Doughty is the guy because he has a favourable fixture at home against Nottingham Forest. It's a nice fixture, but also the attacking threat. Now, we won't expect clean sheets from Luton Town ever. They just don't keep clean sheets. They are probably the weakest defence in the Premier League when you look over the course of the season, but you know, we have that attacking threat, we have those set pieces, we have that creativity, we have him bombing forward up the left-hand side of that Luton Town wing, and we see a player who can definitely get attacking returns. Definitely. You know, he always looks so close to getting attacking returns, even if he hasn't always got them recently in a favourable fixture when there's not too many options in defence, and we want to focus on attacking returns rather than clean sheets. We're looking for the upside. Doughty is definitely a player who could do very, very well this game week. I'm not expecting necessarily any 12 pointers from him, but, you know, a 5-pointer for a goal conceded and an assist, I think is definitely on the cards. And I think that's probably pretty much the best we can hope for from defenders this game week, to be perfectly honest. Speaking of Luton Town players, Morris is going to be our next pick, and I'm going to drop him as well in the good transfer category. Now, he is a fantastic pick, another in-form forward on penalties for his team as well in a favourable fixture, but my minor issue with this one for Morris, I suppose, is the fact that there are other options. So it's not so much that Morris is, you know, not a great pick. He is a great pick, but in terms of transfers, I don't think he's the only option. I think there are some other options for that kind of third forward slot, if you like, or fifth midfielder, depending on what kind of formation you want to run for game week 29. But he's definitely one of the top picks for this game week, and I'll definitely put him in the same area as the likes of Bailey, Doughty, and Morris. These kind of players really, really like for this game week. They might not be the absolute top dogs for the game week, but they are definitely up there, and kind of maybe the kind of second level of players to prioritise in your team. No, still pretty high priority. Still, speaking of this kind of area, I want to talk about Douglas Luiz, because I know a lot of people go with Bailey this week. I am actually going to drop Douglas Luiz below a few of these other guys. I do like this game week for Aston Villa. I've mentioned this already. I do like the look of the Aston Villa attack. And if I'm going for an Aston Villa attacker, it probably goes Watkins, Bailey, and then Douglas Luiz maybe as my third favourite. The open play chances are just not going to be there with no Kamara, with no McGinn due to suspension now. The defensive responsibilities for Douglas Luiz are just going to increase. He is not really a player who gets too many chances from open play. You are depending on penalties. Do you think there is going to be a penalty in this game? If so, pick him, I suppose, but very, very difficult to predict these things. And although he also creates some corners a little bit, I'm not really sure that's the way I'd be wanting to attack this West Ham team, considering they are a team that typically defends quite well from those set pieces. You know, they've got a lot of big guys in their team, haven't they? So I do think I much prefer Bailey to Douglas Luiz at this point. It's just my personal preference. Some of you guys are going to have slightly different views. There's definitely merits to Douglas Luiz. Of course, you've got those set pieces, you've got those penalties, and you've got a lot more minutes as well. So Douglas Luiz, a 90-minute man, that's going to definitely be beneficial in a game week with so few minutes available anyway. So definitely understand the appeal of Douglas Luiz. I definitely still think he is a decent transfer to go for, but for my personal preference, for that open play, consistent attacking threat against a West Ham team that are weak in those open play defensive plays, I would prefer to go for someone like Bailey in my team. So that's why he's going to go a little bit higher. So a lot of people asking about the comparison between the two. My preference is Bailey. Some of you guys might think a little bit differently. That's absolutely fine. Both are valid options for sure. We're going to put our first must-buy in today, and that is going to be Ollie Watkins. Yes, when we talk about the Aston Villa attack and how much we like them against this West Ham team, it's all about Ollie Watkins, really, isn't he? He is the star of the show, and outside of that Spurs game, you would say he's been one of the most informed players of the season. Top scoring forward in FPL. He is just absolutely amazing as an FPL asset, and going into a game week where there are so few of those amazing players available, you know, we've got no Haaland, no Salah, no Saka available to us this game week. Well, at least we've got Ollie Watkins, and he is kind of tracking in the same kind of areas as some of these players. He has been as reliable as some of those other players throughout this season. So does that make him one of the most important players in this game week? I would definitely say so, and I would not be wanting to run into game week 29 without an Ollie Watkins in my team. So there's no doubt about it. He is a must buy and a player you can hold for the season if you wanted to as well. He really has got Wolves the following game week at home, Aston Villa, so could be another opportunity for some attacking returns there. Next up, Jarrod Bowen. I'm going to put him as my first great transfer because I'm still worried about Aston Villa defensively. We saw a little bit of that against Spurs. The red card definitely impacted that, but Aston Villa's defensive numbers, I've been kind of keeping an eye on Aston Villa's defensive numbers, and they've been dropping lower and lower and lower. They're getting worse and worse and worse every single game week, and a lot of that is to do with that. Yeah, no Kamara. We've had some other defensive injuries recently as well. There's going to be no McGinn this game week either. There is their kind of defensive depth is getting worse and worse and worse, and they are really suffering for it. And therefore, you do think that West Ham, if they're going to score a goal in this game, and I think that they might score a goal in this game, possibly going to come from in and around Jarrod Bowen, who's been playing out of position as the central striker, despite being listed as a midfielder with Paqueta and Kudus around him. That's hopefully going to give him a lot more. Now, do we expect another hat-trick like we saw in game week 20, when was it, 26? Maybe not, but hey, I definitely think attacking returns are a possibility and a potential for this game week for Bowen against this Aston Villa side that are struggling more and more defensively as each week goes by. Next up, we're going to talk about Romero, who I'm going to put in the optional category, but no higher than that. Now, he is, he's playing for a fairly decent defence, I guess, in Spurs. I mean, they're not the top defence in the Premier League, but, I mean, like, when we look at this fixture against Fulham, you think it's okay. Are we massively expecting a clean sheet? No, but do you think there's a chance? I guess maybe, but here's the big point. The attacking threat isn't really there. Romero would occasionally score a goal from a header. Yes, he has scored, I believe, 4 goals this season for Spurs. That is a little out of character for him, though. We kind of spoke about this earlier. When he scored those 3 goals early on in the season, everyone was like, Romero is going to be like score every game week for the rest of the season, and then we had to wait for 5 months for his next goal in the Premier League. Yeah, he just doesn't typically score many goals. He doesn't, but he scored a couple of game weeks ago, and I think that will definitely encourage a lot of people to buy him. I wouldn't expect it every game week. If Spurs were to keep a clean sheet, I think bonus points are definitely something that can happen for Romero, although he is also a bit of a yellow card magnet in a way as well. He is a really risky player to go for. He is optional, but I don't know if I expect points from him, to be honest. Going into this game, I think Fulham have a good chance of scoring, and I don't think he's going to pop up with a goal. It's very, very difficult to predict when it's going to happen. It kind of happens almost at random. Very, very difficult to predict when Romero is going to score a goal. So if you want to take that risk, fair enough. But I think I prefer someone like a Doggy, same kind of clean sheet potential, but also has a little bit more open play attacking threat, which is kind of what we look for in FPL. Next up, Tony, who is going to go in the great transfer category. So he's going to drop in just in the category below the likes of Watkins, similar to Bowen, a player you definitely want to, try and get in your FPL team this week. This Burnley fixture is obviously nice for Brentford. And although Tony has been a little bit disappointing in recent game weeks since his return to the Premier League, and I'm sure owners will be disappointed with Tony's kind of returns, you have to remember the fixtures that Tony has had recently. I mean, he's been playing Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Spurs. He's he's had a really, really tough run of fixtures. This is going to be the kind of pretty much the best game that he'll have since returning from his long-term suspension. And, you know, he's back, you know, having played a decent amount of games, should be back up to full fitness and stuff like that, because it's been a little while now. I think he is going to, you know, have some of the best potential that we've seen from him this whole season. I think this is probably the best opportunity to own Tony, best fixture we've had from him. And no, he hasn't had any penalties yet, but that's going to come eventually. We know Brentford love getting penalties. It hasn't happened recently. It's going to happen eventually. And if you're backing any team to receive a penalty this game week, you're backing Brentford against Burnley, and you're backing Tony to take it and bury it as well. Even open play, he still scored, what is it, 4 goals in 9 games, which is not too bad considering the fixtures that he has played. Very, very tough games for him. So yeah, I think this is a good opportunity, and I don't really see why not to go for Tony. You know, definitely one of the high priority players for this game week, which leaves just 3 players left, all Spurs players. First of all, Maddison, definitely a player in the great transfer category. He's back in form, isn't he? So good to see that. Creativity, he's on those set pieces, taking a lot of long shots as well. You know, he's getting the odd opportunity in and around the box as well with his movement, which is pretty interesting as well. Scoring in Gameweek 28, of course. So yeah, why not go for him? Definitely a very, very decent option to go for. One of the best attackers to go for this game week. Certainly one of the best midfielders. You would say that Maddison and Bowen, definitely 2 midfielders you'll strongly want to consider for this game week. There is one more that is perhaps a little bit better, but we'll speak about them in one moment, because first of all, we're going to talk about Pedro Porro. I do think he is a slightly better option than a Doggy. Slightly better, it kind of creates a little bit more, takes a few more shots. When Maddison is not on the pitch, if Maddison is not on the pitch for whatever reason, he's going to be the set piece taker as well. Yeah, he would be one of the priority defenders to go for me, really. I'm going to put him kind of maybe alongside a Doggy. Slightly prefer Pedro Porro. If you're on a free hit and money is no issue, then I think you go for Porro. However, if you are not on a free hit, you need a new defender, I would go a little bit cheaper with a Doggy. I would say a Doggy's better value for money, but if money is no issue for free hitters, then Pedro Porro is probably going to be the answer for you, which leaves us with one more player to place on the tier list today, and it's going to be Heung-min Son. Must buy, essential, probably going to be a captain this game week as well, although don't disregard Watkins as a potential captain as well. I think these 2 players, Son and Watkins, are the 2 most important players to own in Game Week 29. Whether you are on a free hit or not, make sure you have these 2 players, and ideally the 3 players in the category below them as well. After that, yes, there are definitely players we would like to have, but I don't think anyone else is completely essential for this game week. If you have Son, Watkins, and, you know, 2 out of 3 of the kind of great transfers in this tier list, I think you're good to go. But look, you don't need me to tell you why Son is a great pick. He has been in fantastic form over the last couple of game weeks. He is playing as a central striker, despite being listed as a midfielder in FPL. He is on penalties. He is fantastic on those counter-attacks when Spurs find themselves up in those games. He is him. You know, we know this about Son. He's a fantastic, fantastic football player and has been a fantastic FPL asset for years now. So no doubt about it, he is a player you want to have in your FPL team, but I'm sure most of you guys already know about that. I'm sure most of you guys already have him in your team, whether you're free hitting or not. So yeah, I don't need to speak about him too much. But yeah, that is where I would place everyone on the tier list. So no matter what you are doing this game week, I think as long as you look to try and prioritize those players towards the top, and then after that, players slightly lower down, lower priority. Make sure you get the top players first, and then after that you can start looking at some of the players in those lower categories. But yeah, I'll try and get 4 or maybe 5 of those top 5. Those are kind of your key, you know, foundation, spine of your Game Week 29 team. After that, I think there's a little bit more room for a little bit of creativity in there, trying to choose some different players, maybe going for some differentials and stuff like that as well. So yeah, there we go. That's the tier list. Let me know what you think about this one. Do you think I've got everyone roughly right? Is there anyone you would move on this tier list? And is there any players that we haven't spoken about in today's video you would like me to maybe, you know, place them? Leave a comment and I will let you know where I would put those players who are not on this tier list today. So there we go. Make sure you drop a like before you disappear today, guys. Do subscribe if you haven't done already. And don't forget, we will be streaming this evening after the Chelsea versus Newcastle game. So join me then, and we'll be talking more about the blank game week, free hitting, and some of those, you know, maybe slightly differential players as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys on the stream this evening. But aside from that, check out my free hit draft video I posted yesterday, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.